So, welcome to a special edition with the IFPTA and our Meet Our Member. And I'm really pleased to be joined in conversation today with Rich Newman, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of Scale Computing. So, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
So, we've met a couple of times at some different events and things, and you are actually in a very important area of the industry, but you also have a very long background, in this particular area. So, why don't we just start off with talking about, who is Scale Computing today, and how have you evolved in serving the industries, especially food and beverage, and I'll throw in there retail too, because there's so much crossover between the two.
Yeah, thanks. Well, so scale computing, we're what we like to call the leading provider of technology and services, managed services for the multi-site operator space. So multi-site operators are anybody that has a number of stores or restaurants or C stores, gas stations. We even provide technology into the unattended space, so things like parking garages and the like as well. It's an area which, is evolving very quickly. As you know, there's a lot of technology that's going into these types of locations, and our specialty is ensuring that technology runs better, runs more securely, and runs more reliably. And we have specific focus really on two areas. One of which is managed networks, and the other is edge computing. And we actually bring those together in a single platform.
Well, first of all, that's part of a lot of conversations today. And I think people understand there's a managed networks piece, but people have different definitions of edge computing. And actually, they have different definitions of multi unit operators as well. So it's really sort of the same problem that's there. So, can we just define a little bit more the scope of the areas and then the specific offerings and things that you provide?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So let's start with sort of the business side. So from our standpoint, our customers include single site operators with a single restaurant or a single retail location, all the way up to very large chains, including some of the largest brands on a global basis. We are a global company. We're operating in North America, EMEA, Asia, as well as South America and Latin America. It's a footprint that's evolved for us. We've grown through acquisition, and the products I'll talk about are the ones that are currently part of our product portfolio. And as you mentioned, they absolutely include edge computing, which is a core part of what we do. But we're also a managed network service provider, and as you mentioned, that technology, the ability to have a network to be connected to the network, has been sort of table stakes for restaurant operators for a while now. But the requirements have obviously evolved and developed. And one of our sort of premise in the market is that edge and networking are now converging, integrating into a single whole, and you can't have one without the other.
Well, that's true. You can't. Do you think, you're covering a wide spread here if you're talking about independent operators all the way up to multinationals in there? Do you think that people really appreciate, how important this is from the single unit all the way up and globally?
I certainly hope they do, because if you're running a restaurant today, chances are you need to have technology to make your business work. And if you're a single operator, the requirements are not necessarily all that different than if you're a global operator. It's the scale to which you have to operate those systems. It can also be reflected in the sophistication. But in both cases, what we see our customers want is they want to have things as cost effective as possible. They want to see as much value add. They want to have them be reliable. They want to have them be secure.
Well, if you think about that, though, while they may recognize it, and we have a lot of people, I mean, they just come right into it because technology is the air, that they're working with today because you can't really run anything. But the complexity of the unit, because there's so many different applications and they don't necessarily get it all from one. And sometimes I wonder if people are confused because they think it's the application provider who's just providing all this and taking care of it, and there's so many of them that they don't realize that they have to bring it together under a single umbrella managed network, and that the safety and security of it. And I think that's more of what, do they get that, or do you find that people just really think that it's they're getting it embedded in what they get?
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of seeing it now. You and I both know that if you just roll the clock back, 5 or 10 years, you had a number of sort of large operators in the space that were sort of one-stop shop for everything that you wanted to have within a restaurant or restaurant system, and that often or sometimes include the networking and some of the components around that. Um, but that's kind of evaporated, and even those large one-stop shops that we're talking about no longer do some of the things they used to do in the space because they don't necessarily do it well. They don't necessarily do it cost effectively. And the largest brands, the sophisticated guys, recognize the fact that technology is a competitive differentiator. So you just can't do what everyone else is doing and expect to be able to somehow succeed or be somehow better.
Well, maybe what we should do is break it down though, because if you think about it, if you're dealing with the independent and somebody who's, really coming on board, those guys just select systems, just somebody takes it to them, their friend uses it or something, and I don't know how you control or how you vet that, and that must be a challenge for scale, to be able to deal with. At least, the larger companies, uh, depending upon geography, franchisee, franchisor, they may have a more controlled process. Well, what do you do when people just throw things in overnight?
Yeah, so the single site operators, if you'll remember, they used to get the majority of their systems from their payment card processors. The ISOs they work with would also somehow magically be able to provide the point of sale. Those days are over. People need more sophistication. And in fact, the back in those days, you can think about the tail wagging the dog. It's switched around right now. Often the payment card relationships, the processing relationships are now following the technology, the point of sale system. But with that aside,
Or those payment card guys are offering the POS.
or the payment card guys are, well, that's and that's been some of the premise was there were companies like Heartland, which bought
Absolutely.
Experian as part of that thing. But that world has changed quite a bit. But to answer your question directly, from our standpoint as a global technology provider, we engage with single site operators because the brands they represent have selected us or recommend us. It's extraordinarily rare when someone just out of the blue who might own a onesie twosie location finds us and says, "Hey, we want to work with you guys." We're happy to take their business. And because of the requirements the brands put upon us to be able to support their individual franchisee operators, we can take
Right.
on a small operator. But the reason the brands select us and they require their franchisees to use us is because they've determined that have the best product in the market relative to security, relative to performance, relative
Right.
to operation.
Well, I think that, and then we're going to leave the independent and the small guy, and we're really going to talk about those brands and the multinationals and the larger groups. But if you think about it, you can have a single unit that's very popular, and all of a sudden, unit number two is in Dubai. So
Hmm.
because it's much easier for them to scale, you know, uh,
Yep.
quicker, which is a great name, by the way, for a company. So
Hmm.
it's much easier for them to do that. Uh, and I think they realize very quickly, as soon as that happens, that there's a little bit more complex, situation for them than it was before, because you just couldn't do that before, but today you can.
For sure. And that scenario you just talked about, we see more often than not in the fine dining space. And we've had customers that are in the fine dining space.
Absolutely.
They have a successful concept. It's absolutely doing super well in Chicago. They want to move it to New York, and suddenly they've got twice the problems in terms of how they manage the IT infrastructure there, and they need good partners to deliver that.
Well, there's a steakhouse I'm going to take you to in December or January that's actually opening up their second unit from Las Vegas in New York, and not that there aren't a lot of steakhouses there, but what I will tell you
Yep.
is that they're advertising that most steakhouses go from New York to Las Vegas, and they're the oldest steakhouse
Yeah,
coming to New York. But they're
I
also
know.
talking about Dubai and every place else.
Yeah, and I know exactly who you're talking about, and I'm excited for it. We do have a good connection there already, so you'll be the second person that's got a dinner plan for me there. So let's go as
Well,
soon
I'm
as
going to
they
be
get
there
going.
opening night, so
Yeah.
we're doing that. So okay, so let's talk about then the larger people who are of scale, that
Hmm.
they know what they want to do, but they have a lot of complexity. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So first of all, when you have the larger operator, they may have an awful lot of independent siloed applications that they choose, and they're not going to go with an all-in-one provider. So that's
Right.
number one. So why don't we start there? before we even talk about things like franchisees and
Yeah.
licensees and things like that. So, what are those complexities, and how are you? What are the products and services you're offering to somebody like that?
Yeah, so this gets into both our networking and our edge computing products. So the first thing to understand is that they're building an ecosystem that's going to run, their front of house and their back of house systems. They're looking at and deploying infrastructure that we would consider connected or smart kitchens, and it isn't all from one vendor, obviously. So they have to run different applications. What they can't afford to do, knowing even if you're very large, and is have a whole range of different systems that are not really connected with each other. That each one represents its own failure point. Each represents its own, system that has to be managed, maintained, monitored, updated, patched. So this, what you see, in this world is strong requirements for edge computing, where you can use technology like virtualization or containerization to deploy those applications as software only, running on a single edge system that can provide high availability, fault tolerance. It could allow very different applications to sit side by side on the same piece of hardware and benefit from the fact that they're running in a clustered, high availability configuration where they're managed, where they're monitored, and where the entire restaurant experience is software defined. So all of that configuration and
Right.
components you treat as
Wait,
software.
well, let me just ask you this because you mentioned something, a nuance that I want to make sure we point out here, because you talked about connected kitchens. And what we
Mhm.
really are talking about is a connected ecosystem. But, the connected kitchens, the equipment can do it. But what I've been finding, and I'm curious as to what you see here, is a lot of times people are looking at those connections in silos as well. The equipment goes ahead and communicates one way through something, maybe not connected into the overall piece, within the four walls. And so you have that piece that's doing it. Then you have the surveillance systems. They're doing their own thing, right? You
Mhm.
have obviously the ones point of sale, credit cards, then you have music, right? Are you finding that people have figured out that maybe they need to bring these all under one, or are they all really still, is there's still a lot of people running separate networks, separate things in this?
Oh, there people understand that they need to start, bringing that under a single umbrella and managing it accordingly. You just can't survive without it. So, in your example of the connected kitchen, when you're putting smart kitchen systems in and they're just talking to the vendor who supplied it cloud and they're telling you, no problem, we'll be able to know when that piece of equipment isn't behaving properly. You're not getting half the value, that you could be out of it. It's really much more about ownership of that data and being able to make the data that you're getting out of the smart, kitchen systems actionable, much more quickly than if you're waiting for the vendor to tell you when they need to. And it's not a big step to do that. And in fact, it's an important one because once you control those connections, to think of it that way, you have the ability to secure it. One thing we know, the world is going to see a lot of compromises of those systems. It's going to be very disturbing when operators discover that their smart oven system is now hosting malware. But unfortunately, that is going to happen. You cannot count on vendors securing those systems themselves. They're going to hopefully provide a decent portfolio, but again, you need organizations like ours to ensure that this stuff is
and
not
that
only run.
and that's sort of interesting because I don't think that people always understand, all of the different touch points or ways that people can gain access. And that's a very good, example of that, that somebody could just screw you up simply by changing your changing temperatures and things like that, or actually could create unsafe, food by
Hmm.
how holding temperatures before you even know. So boy, I tell you what, you're leading into a number of different subjects. I'm trying to figure out where to start here. So,
Right.
um, so first of all, when you come in, you said that people, you're referred to people, they bring you in that they know who you are. Okay. So they may not know, but I'm sure they're also bringing you in to be something of a trusted advisor, a trusted
Hmm.
partner. So when you come into a new client, how do you actually really get that inventory and assess what they're doing? And maybe there's some immediate changes and things that they can make that they don't even know about.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost all of our engagements start with some level of discovery. We'll ask questions. One of our strengths in this business is that, again, as I said, we are focused on multi-site operators only. So we have we've got lots of customers that are restaurant operators. We know the systems. We're not approaching this from a horizontal standpoint, expecting that what works for a quick serve restaurant chain is also going to work for a branch bank or someone that's in the manufacturing space. It doesn't really work like that.
So
Uh,
wait a second. So that's sort of interesting because I would sit there and say if you're in multi-industry verticals, that actually having that knowledge may be helpful because I saw a robotic dish machine that was for Denny's that actually was built on a robotic arm that was used in a manufacturing plant. And so,
yeah,
therefore, we're starting to see the crossover and robotics, right? So, that fact that you have that, while it may not be directly applicable, you do have the knowledge to say, hey, if you add this piece in, what
yeah.
does that do?
You're right, but the problem that we see more often than not with that is that the robotic assembly system that works well in the manufacturing facility might work in the restaurant space, but not at the economics the restaurant space needs to operate under. And that's been a big sort of failure point
Not
with some of
today.
these components. Yeah, not
Well,
today, but
never's a long time, right? So, and
yeah,
it could.
yeah. So
So, what about bandwidth? Because I think people underestimate the size of the pipe and what they need. The second that they start looking at, using Vision AI, and they're
mhm.
looking at, using security feeds and stuff on a real time basis for training or for how many pepperonis are on a pizza or whatever it is that they're doing with that, all of a sudden your bandwidth requirements are also going up, in
Mhm.
there because you're starting to do something real time and you're starting to stream. So, how do you project or tell somebody in advance or monitor and make sure that they're getting consistent things without prioritizing and shutting other things down?
Yeah, you have to have a network that's smart enough to be able to do, quality of service. It has to be an SD-WAN based system like what we offer so that you can establish priorities around that stuff. But even more importantly, we see changes. It's not even necessarily about streaming. We've got customers that have moved, for example, from an older point of sale system to a newer one like
Yep.
Toast, and suddenly said, this isn't working. Why not? And you go back in and say, well, what worked for your old system from a network standpoint doesn't work for your new one. Similarly, what we've also seen with a lot of the machine learning and AI associated with vision technology and computer vision
Absolutely.
is massively, massively promising. But you just cannot take, the data processing associated with it, grab all that imagery, push it up the cloud, and expect to get results back. So you got to be able to count on the ability to process really a growing, exploding amount of information and data at the edge, which again, leads you to the conclusion that I need to have an edge computing platform to be able to do these things.
Right. Well, but also, people always talk about AI. You're probably also using AI embedded in what you're doing to be able to monitor, make suggestions, to see
Mhm.
when there's a fault, when they need more bandwidth, if there's a security issue in there. Where do you see in your business and where do you see scale itself? You know, so you're the chief strategy officer, right?
Yeah.
You're taking a look at these things. So what's your own strategy for where you see the market going and what you need to do to provide to meet the demand and actually think ahead?
Yeah, it's sort of threefold. So, first, I will tell you that in our customer support systems, our client services, AI is having a huge impact. It's allowing us to better understand what customers need. It's allowing us to provide information to customers in a much more timely and automated fashion. And our customers benefit from that tremendously. The second thing is in the collection of all this monitoring and machine data, we also use leverage AI, heavily there to be able to understand and correlate what's happening from, both a good, the bad, and the ugly standpoint to identify problems and notify our customers about them before the customer is even aware of it. And then the last part is again at the edge, the ability to be able to manage the complexity associated with machine learning and manage models and distribution of models and some of the specific AI processing as part of the applications that our customers are deploying. For us, at least, has been a huge advantage in the marketplace.
Well, you also have specific tools that are really, specific solutions like Hypercore and Fleet Manager that you're using also as platforms. There's some other ones as well. So how do you use those types of tools, embedded in all of this?
Yeah, we actually were very early on in terms of using machine learning in within our clusters, within our clusters, to do fault identification and make decisions about how the system should autonomously look to
So
maintain state and
autonomously, I
scale.
think is the key there, right?
It is. It is, and what we consider, we'll call it intelligence. Isn't necessarily that smart. It's not anything a human couldn't figure out quite quickly. But the problem is, you can't have, if you've got 1,000 locations, you're not going to have 1,000 people logged into 1,000 clusters, 7 by 24, all looking at them, trying to decide what to do. So the simple ability to be able to make decisions, even if they're simple decisions, because you have a machine learning model, is a huge win.
So, as people are adding more and more to the unit, you're sort of in a modularized piece that you can add to it and build, and that you
Hmm.
can help scale with them. So, how does one, engage with you, and then how do they go ahead and they build up, as they start expanding their portfolio, either of number of applications or the amount of bandwidth that they're actually using,
Yeah, so it's well. Let me approach those
and
in
the
two ways.
number of people that are connected, equipment,
Yep. Yeah.
employees, customers,
Yeah.
right? So it's more than that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So starting with the networking side, everyone in our industry today has a network and has a firewall. The question, customers come to us when they want to do better than what they already have, and that's often the case. They either want a better service provider, which we like to say we are, or they want better technology, which we also like to say we offer because it's our technology.
Right.
But when they go with us, they do get both, which is a win. And when they have both, they're able to do more things with their existing restaurant network. And often they're not necessarily paying more. In many cases, they're actually paying less for it, which is also a win. The edge computing side it gets even more interesting because the world we live in today really represents largely what I like to call sort of the monolithic client server application environment. It's one reflection or another of the days when every restaurant had a back of house server, a manager's workstation, single purpose systems that were driving digital signage, maybe a kiosk. Most of it largely was Windows. Sometimes it was Linux, but it also had typically a database associated with it and the like. And this technology stack, which is probably about 30 years old right now, is in its last days. What it's being replaced by is really cloud to edge. So there are providers out there today who promote what they call their cloud only or cloud based POS, but
Right.
it's not really cloud only because of course there's something running within the restaurant. If there wasn't and they lost their connectivity, they wouldn't be able to operate at all.
Okay, so wait. You're making it actually rather easy on me because I was going to ask you about this. So
Yep.
let's say in the last 30 days, there was
Hmm.
some sort of outage out there. There wasn't
Hmm.
necessarily an internet outage, but it might have been a cloud or outage out there. Do you think, it's sort of like deja vu. We started with on-prem based systems. Then we started to go, and we had master slave, and then we sort of went out with certain
Hmm.
components of it, and then we went completely out. And now it seems like we're sort of going in and out. So, given the complexity and all the things that are going on, and the more things that depend upon these things, what's your prediction of what the future is going to look like of how somebody's going to set up their system, host it, because of things like this that open up your eyes?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be cloud plus edge. That's the new architecture. And again, if you I told you the monolithic client server world was about 30 years old. You and I remember what came before then. There were host based systems. There were mainframes. There were mini computers. There were I
The
series, AES
AS400.
400. Exactly. That world and those systems were they made a lot of the things we do today possible. They were the starting point, but very few people were putting a AS400 or a host-based system inside of a restaurant. So it was the advent of
I
relatively
knew a
low
few
cost.
people that were doing that, by the way.
Well, that was a bold thing back then, but what made it is what's made this as widely available as it is today is the low cost microprocessors and this democratization. But again, we are at the beginning part of this technology paradigm shift where edge computing integrated with cloud computing is what's driving the next generation of systems. So I started this by looking to answer your question of like, well, how do people start with you or where do they go? The
Right.
answer is they're looking at their existing restaurant environment, you know, and they're saying, I could do this better. And they can. And they can implement an edge computing platform today. They can take their legacy systems and they can run them on that edge computing platform, typically as virtual machines, and they can start deploying containers. And that's really what's next for a lot of these applications. Some of the robotic systems that you talked about, well, to make those systems work, what the vendors that have them are doing is they're putting in these small little servers in addition to whatever else is running in the restaurant that runs that next generation container based application set. What a lot of the AI and ML applications that we just talked about, if you're buying it just from the vendor's deploying their own little server to run that. What edge computing provides you is the ability to do all of those things. You don't have to add more physical boxes. You can consolidate it down. And we've got some great customer successes that have seen
Do
that.
people actually consult with you in advance before they do stuff, or they just sort of do it, plug it in, and then you find out and say, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, hopefully we're talking to them, which is why you and I keep meeting each other at these shows because we're having this conversation. We've been having these conversations now for a couple years, now, and they'll continue, and eventually we get to the place where the majority of the world will be running edge computing. Right now, it's
So
a minority, but we're getting there.
if you think about it, there's a second party that's also very dependent upon you and should be expecting you to be very successful as a company with the operators, and that's actually the suppliers themselves. Because
Hmm.
who's the first person that gets blamed when there are issues? They always point at the supplier and they don't look at what might have happened within the unit, right? So, how do you maintain those relationships and how do you identify the next generation of supplier who's going to evolve so you're also ahead of the curve in that?
Yeah, that's a. I'm glad you're raising it. So one of the things that we're an infrastructure provider at the end of the day. We are not building business facing applications, whether it's signage or
Right.
point of sale. Instead, our job is to make our clients run those applications more successfully, and we're looking to make our partners in the ecosystem, run their applications more successfully. And that could be Oracle, that could be PAR. We have a large number of customers running Toast. We want to be the best choice for running those applications. We want to
And a
reduce
person should
friction
be
wherever we
comfortable
can.
if they're going to have flexibility that you're able to work with them on that.
Absolutely, and experience working with them. And we're not playing favorites. We're not picking one over the other. We're not suggesting it. Our customers come to us with here's what we want to do. Scale, can you make it happen? And our answer is yes. When we
Well, you're
talk to
going to
the
help them.
suppliers, well, yeah,
Yeah,
same
well,
thing.
you're going to help them scale for sure. So, if we think about the multi industries you're in, uh, it used to be that everybody said that food service and restaurant industry was behind retail, but recently I've been hearing that retail is following food service because of delivery, drive-through, things like this. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned C store earlier. Um, are there some learnings to be had one way or the other that through your experience that you think that the restaurant food service industry should be considering that you see somewhere else maybe we haven't picked up on it yet, or those marriages that are occurring between the industries are going to bring the bear?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one customer we're really proud of is Casey's, and they're the number 5 pizza chain in the country right now. And
Yep.
if if you go to Iowa, they'll tell you the best pizzas from a gas station. Is what they like to say.
Well, I know
The
you've been
and
to Nax, right? So you see
Yep,
pizza, chicken, pizza, chicken, hot dogs, but it's becoming fresh foods as well.
fresh foods, freshly prepared foods. They all of our C store clients are implementing KDS systems. They have to integrate with the third party delivery services, which is amazing to me. I mean, there are people today that are ordering pizza, that are ordering, fried chicken, and they're getting it delivered via Uber Eats. But that driver is stopping at a Casey's or he's stopping at one of our other C store clients to do that pickup. And then, as you know, Racetrack, another client of ours, just made a major acquisition of a food
Well,
of a
Potbelly.
hospitality brand. Yeah. So we're going to see more of that. It's not even. there are learnings between the two. There's an awful lot of cross pollination, and again, we see that we have customers that are in the fine dining space. Where a single dinner ticket might be three, four, five, $600. We've got customers that are selling sandwiches. We've got customers that are mobile that are running our technology today in their mobile trucks.
And
So
we're started to head for vending machines that are really restaurants in a box.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's technology, and it's about, for us at least, it's about making that technology work better, which means you need a great network, you
And
need
it's
edge
connectivity,
computing,
yeah.
and we can provide you with both.
So if we look ahead and we think about what the biggest opportunities are going to be in the new year, because look, we're approaching the end of the year, people are doing their budgets, they're planning ahead. So since you have this inside ear with so many people in the industry and you're out there, where do you see their investments are going to be next year? And is there some investments maybe they should be considering that they're not focused on, but you're seeing it?
So this isn't this is old news. Every survey says it, but our industry is investing in AI and ML. Um, what we would suggest is don't just invest in those technologies, but invest in the technologies that will allow those to be successful. So one of the things that I've spent a lot of time focusing on is what does increased complexity of the underlying technology infrastructure mean, and how do you manage it? So, simply put, the more complex a system is, the more it's susceptible to entropy, the more it's susceptible to decay, which you don't even see. So we've seen, very complex systems failed to perform, failed to deliver. Uh, as our customers are looking to these investments, some of which are very complicated systems, they have to be investing also in systems that allow them to manage those things properly to make what is
Or you make
complex.
it easier for them to grow to scale
Yeah.
and to do what they need to do because you're really handling that piece of it and allowing them to focus on their business and those applications that are going to either help them be more efficient, raise more revenue, or perhaps connect with their guests and customers.
Yes, exactly. And they need insights. They need to be able to see what is happening. They have to be able to get access. It's as I tell our customers, it's your data. You know, if you don't have it, get it. If someone else has it and you don't, get it back from them. Don't give up control of that.
So, just to sort of end on this, is the chief strategy officer here. So I just asked you the question about where people were going from the operator side, what they might look at in here.
Mhm.
But where is scale going as you're trying to meet the future? What's the next steps for you guys?
So as I mentioned, we're global now. This again is the combination of Acumair and Scale Computing, which occurred, as of September of this year. So we're going to double down on our global growth. We're continuing to invest in it. And our customers, particularly our very large U.S. based customers, are counting on that as they're expanding. And what we see is the world continues to get smaller. The experience that a customer has walking into a Taco Bell in Irvine, California, that same customer, because he was on a plane or maybe a family member of theirs, wants to have the same experience when they're walking into a Taco Bell in Liverpool, England. There's both
Are there Taco Bells
experiential
in
qualities to
Liverpool,
it and
England?
brand value.
Wait, do they have Taco Bell in Liverpool, England? I
Yes,
know
they
that
do.
we have Pizza Huts and KFCs. I didn't know that. And so now I'm going
Yeah,
to have to look that one up.
Taco Bell is expanding quite quickly in the UK. So Europe is it's Taco Bell. No secret here is Yum's fastest growing international brand.
Well, the interesting thing about it is Yum itself has a new global CIO who came from Marriott at one time. So he
Yeah.
certainly understands, global expansion and how to deal with customer facing things and multi country and things. So,
Yep. Global loyalty. Absolutely.
well, loyalty, see, that is a big one. And we used to complain in the past that there weren't great loyalty systems in the restaurant industry. Hotels, casinos had them, airlines had them.
Hmm.
But now all of a sudden, we seem to have really good ones. We seem to know our customers really well.
Yeah, and that's again, there's a lot of value that ML AI is going to have with that in terms of understanding who your loyal customers are, making the right suggestion to them, making it easy for them to activate their loyalty programs. Loyalty has to be, it can't be a friction point. When it becomes a friction point, you've accomplished the opposite of what you tried to do. So,
Right. So you've mentioned that you and I have met up at a number of different conferences over the last couple of years, and actually, Scale and Acumera before that made an investment in the IFBTA. So just to lead it in there, so we know about why Scale. The question is, why the IFBTA, and how you see the importance of investing in that partnership.
Well, for us, it's simple. We want to be good corporate citizens. We want to be able to give back, and the IFBTA provides a forum for us to do that. We can share what we know with the community. We can share both what's been successful and what hasn't. Our goal is, we want to see every restaurant operator be as successful as they possibly can, and the IFBTA provides the resources to do that, and that's why we support the mission.
Well, it's very important to us to have members and support from Scale, uh, just because you're in such an area that you are enabling the growth of technology in our industry, and you're making it easy for people to do this. And it's not necessarily easy, as you pointed out, with the number of applications and
Mhm.
all the different parts that are now being connected. So uh, having you at the table with us actually makes a great deal of difference, because it's an area that really needs that kind of support, and globally, as well. So, as we said, I'll look forward to meeting you along the road here again, perhaps between now and the end of the year, even, and as we start the new year. Uh, and we really appreciate, Scale being a industry partner of the IFBTA, and Rich, having you join us as the street strategy officer. You can help us with our strategy
Yep.
as well. So we appreciate that partnership.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. And I'll see you in December.
You will do that. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being an important member of the IFBTA.